Hello. So, second attempt at going live this morning because for some reason I couldn't add Fiona, who is going to come on and talk about the tests or some of the tests that we can do for menopause. So, many of you will have gone to your doctor and said, is something a little bit wrong? And perhaps had blood tests. Hopefully you'll have had a conversation, and it might be that your doctor is aware that things are changing for you and that you are, hi Rachel, nice to see you. I'm just back on my phone because I didn't have the icon to get Fiona on screen, who's going to talk about the Dutch test. And just today we were going to focus on tests in general for menopause. And as you know, we can go and get blood tests and that may or may not show us something. And quite frankly, well, by the time some things are showing up in your bloods, you really want to have been doing something about that all along with food or supplements or superfoods or lifestyle changes. So, you know, thyroid, for instance, would be a classic one. For me, at 46, my thyroid showed low, and it was already for many years showing me symptoms that something wasn't as it should be. And it took me, you know, things to get really bad for me to go to the doctor, have a test, and see that my thyroid was low, whereas more sensitive tests of a different nature would have shown me that a long, long time previously. So I wanted to focus on tests because I do get asked about them. And I usually say to women, you know, to go and get a blood test as a first port of call because it is free. And like I've said, it will show you if something is happening, like follicle stimulating hormone, for instance, which pushes the ovary to release an egg anyway, as part of our natural cycle. That ramps up at menopause because it is more difficult for us to release an egg as we get older, as we've been doing that for many years or trying to do that for many years. So it's an indication that things are changing to see a higher level of follicle stimulating hormones. And if we were to see that in a much younger woman, it would be quite an alarm bell really, because we shouldn't see that out of proportion to action. So I'm just going to text back on. So and Fiona's going to talk about the Dutch test, but other tests that I might recommend. So if we're seeing symptoms and we're not seeing anything on a blood test, it could be that the doctor's not looking in the right direction. So have they done tests for oestrogen and progesterone levels? Have they looked at other hormones? So often we need to prompt our doctor to look at the right hormones for us. And it might be that they refuse to look at certain hormones. So you'll get, you know, a private doctor who will look at DHEA, will look at a testosterone, for instance, and maybe other hormones if you've got other goals, like you're still trying to get pregnant, you're still wanting to make a baby, but you're in your early 40s, they might look at other hormones. So we might need to prompt our doctor. We might need some knowledge ourselves to say, can you look at this for me? And then we might have other issues going on. So it might be digestive issues that come up at menopause. And in fact, what we're looking at is, you know, maybe a microbiome test, because it's quite common for women to find that they have certain food intolerances. So some women go for food intolerance tests. These are done privately, so microbiome tests are looking at the whole of your gut flora and whether there's parasites present in the gut and how the gut is functioning from that perspective, whether the gut is healthy in its action. And that can be tremendously helpful if you've got digestive upsets like constipation or a change. Here we go, here's Fiona. Let's bring Fiona on. So ask Fiona to join the broadcast. I'm going to an invitation. There we go. So all the things that weren't happening on my laptop are thankfully happening on my phone. Technology. So hello, it worked. Are you on your laptop?
No, I'm on my phone now.
Yeah, me too. I just wasn't getting any icons, although I have done lives on my laptop and definitely been able to invite people on, so I don't know what that's going on, but Anyway, we're here. So I was just saying that blood tests aren't always the answer. And even if you go for blood tests with your doctor, they might not look at the kind of hormones that really need to be looked at depending on where you're at. And in fact, some women might present with something completely different, like digestive upsets, and we might look at microbiome or food intolerance tests. But really what I wanted to look at today was the Dutch test, because I, in truth, don't know much about it. I've never had one. Perhaps I should. And and that's a really good question. You know, who should have the Dutch test? So let's introduce you first of all. Fiona and I both work as homeopaths, and we work a lot with hormonal health, and we are cooking up some work together, a bit more targeted in terms of a 6-week course on balancing your hormones with supplemental supplements, homeopathy, and lifestyle advice and dietary advice, etc. So that's going to be coming early next year, and we're working on that together. So we've been talking hormones together for a long time. But can I ask first of all, what got you into homeopathy? Was it through your kids?
Yeah, it was through my child who I got kind of one of those awful prognosis from the doctor where he thought my child had Tourette's and prescribed, you know, a sort of, I can't even remember what the drug is it Ritalin? Something I really didn't want to hear, and that just prompted me just open the doors, and I went off. Homeopathy works amazingly. He's, you know, had absolutely no signs of that condition after a couple of months. He's the most fantastic young man now, and I was so amazed by it. But that's what then I started treating myself, started becoming a bit of a lay prescriber, helping out friends and family, and then I was just like, I have to try it. And yes, from there. And now, I treat women from all over the world. I see people on Zoom, which is so amazing for homeopaths because we can reach out to people anywhere. And yeah, it's great. I'm so delighted that I found this, way of working with health. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And I think, you know, we need sometimes to be reminded, not just by our clients perhaps, but by certain conversations, insights, you know, that we are in an amazing space. Because when you've been in a space, whatever it is, for a long time, it's hard to see outside of that sometimes, you know. And for me, I reconnected with, you know, really kind of the focus on women's health through doing a talk, and in early 2020, which isn't that long ago, but I just did this talk and was flooded with questions of oh, so there is something I can do other than HRT. And I was like, yes, there is. And this came from a particular demographic, really, because I was doing a talk in Haringey, Homes for Haringey, and the demographic there was Middle Eastern, Eastern Mediterranean, and Afro-Caribbean women. And it really struck me that within those different communities of women, there were different issues for menopause, you know. And then when I began to look into studies, I saw that different demographics of women have different issues at menopause. So Eastern Mediterranean, for instance, there are more bone issues. The average age for menopause is 45. So looking at it, as you just said, from a worldwide perspective is also really interesting. Where do you come from? What do you bring to this space? And that really kind of spurred me on to open the conversation much more about natural menopause, and to talk to communities where perhaps mainstream medicine isn't the first port of call, which it isn't necessarily in an Afro-Caribbean community, for instance. They have a lot of, and are really tied to kind of home cures, home prescribing, local cures. You know, CMOS, for instance, has lots of benefits. So, you know, there's such scope being able to work online, isn't there? It's incredible.
Yeah, and I find, for example, clients in America, they really push down an incredibly medicalized route, and have a lot of people, a lot of influencers, a lot of people. So in a way, my American clients are the most daring in that they're reaching out for solutions. They're really like, I'm the first person, you know, that I've ever looked for something natural. The Europeans, they tend to have had homeopathy integrated in their lives if they're Jewish, so they're a little bit more open to it and know what they're signing up for. But it is really interesting looking at everybody's different to it. And in the UK, I think it's, you know, there's a lot of cultural pressure that sort of like, I'm missing out if I don't do it. I have people who are actually really well and say, well, do I need to go on it? You know, I feel great. Am I missing out? Which is quite interesting. And that's really been a phenomenon in the last couple of years. So yeah, it does vary country by country, definitely.
I love that we're more prone to FOMO.
Yeah.
It's a little island in the middle of between the Atlantic and Norway. We're like, what are we missing out on? Do I need to have it? So true. So I'm curious about the Dutch test, and I did have some questions. So first of all, how do you do a Dutch test compared to we've all had blood tests at some point? What do you do for a Dutch test?
Yeah, well, the first thing about the Dutch is it's a dry urine test. So that means basically you're just peeing a cup or peeing a strip. So it's really, and the important thing about a Dutch test is that you don't just do one sample, you do a sample for our periods. So you actually do 4 or 5 samples. So what happens is you receive the kit through the post, really nicely packaged, little A4 envelope, and you open it up and really all clearly laid out with the instructions of what to do. Then you collect your samples, you start dinner time, and then you do before bed. If you wake in the night and need a pee, you do it then morning and then a couple of hours later. And you just leave the strips to dry, which takes, you know, a couple of hours, fold them back up, put them in the prepaid envelope, and that's it. And they go back to the lab. And the lab take about 12 days to turn around. And what you get back, the interesting thing about the report is that it's so comprehensive. So lots of other tests, if you did a blood test or a urine test, they're often missing, well, they do miss this information. You kind of need to do quite a few of them to get the information that's all included in the Dutch. So because it doesn't just look at your sex hormones, it also looks at your stress hormones, which of course have a huge impact on how you're metabolizing and producing your sex hormones. It looks at your DHEA, which is your adrenal function. It looks at cortisol, melatonin, your B vitamins, and neurotransmitters. So because hormones in the endocrine system is so overlapping, if one little bit's out, the rest of it's going to be out. But also what you tend to see is people have 3 or 4 elements out of whack, and they're all impacting each other. And that's what Dutch test gives you. It gives you this sort of much bigger picture as to what's happening. So I really love it in menopause. It's great at any time that you've got any hormone variation, you know, in your 20s, but really in menopause, it's a way to understand what's happening in your body and to really relate to that, to see you've got insomnia. Is that your hormones, or is that stress, or is it an interplay of both? And I think when clients sort of see their results really written black and white, saying that they are, for example, metabolizing their estrogen really badly, and that's toxic, that then when I suggest, you know, lifestyle changes from that, they really take it forward and are able to commit to those changes. So in a way, the Dutch test is a great way for you to really understand much more deeply how you can optimize your health. Yeah. Really about that, and realize that impacts me. It's not just that my work is stressful. Look what it's actually doing to metabolism. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of give a very practical example, I don't metabolize estrogen particularly well according to my DNA profile. And so I should eat certain foods to sort of scavenge excess and to create balance. So you know, my take home is always eat more broccoli. But you know, it makes sense when you see it like that, and you understand that for the whole of your life you've battled with, you know, estrogen like weight round the middle because you don't scavenge well. So we could be using this for all sorts of, you know, all sorts of issues in menopause. So weight gain, I've just mentioned, you've just mentioned insomnia. And the balance between stress hormones, which are cortisols, and most of the other hormones which are made from proteins, in fact. And we talked about that extensively last week in my thyroid webinar. you know. And so it's this wonderful, I keep seeing life in Venn diagrams, you know, where you just talked about that crossover, you know, where it might be a blend of both, and that's why the hormones are going out of kilter. So just would you use this, and I think this is something that I know what the answer is, but would you use this throughout all stages of menopause? So pre-menopause, you mentioned, you know, a younger woman, perimenopause, things are beginning to change, the follicle stimulating hormones beginning to ramp up. True menopause, when a lot of that is going on, and it could be all sorts of other stresses for women, as we've talked about. And post-menopause, when we're looking at the function of, you know, brain, bladder, bones, are they going to see us into old age? You know, can it be used at all of those stages?
So yes, it can. There is one stage where it's a little bit trickier around the collection procedure, and that is where you're not sure if your periods have stopped, and perhaps you're still having a bit of breast tenderness and some PMS, but there's no actual flow. And with that, there is an extra step that you need to do in terms of determining whether you are still ovulating, using an ovulation kit from your chemist.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, perimenopause, it's fantastic, because as soon as you're getting new warning symptoms, you know, tiredness, even if there's nothing happening to your cycle, and we're really talking about women in their 30s and definitely early 40s, the peri will be showing up there. But if you go to your GP and you say tired, they'll ask if you've got a regular cycle. You say yes. They're like, okay, it's not your hormone. But
Yeah,
in
absolutely,
age, that's a really great test, because that's up picking up on what's stressing you, and you know, just steer your ship course. Take another path where you start dialing down on those stresses, and with that, you're going to using a real sailing, you're going to sail menopause.
yes.
Of every stage, and definitely post. So I think women often think, oh, I have no sex hormones once I'm post, but you do still have sex hormones. And what's really important at this stage is how you're using the ones that you've got. And that's another real opportunity to go, okay, I now want the rest of my life to be lived in thriving, wellness, feeling great. And so you can look at do the doctor then and really work out again what you need to do to optimize your health and to maximize, you know, your life.
Yeah, yes. So that kind of brings me on, I guess, to in a way, how often would you do it? So if you saw a woman, say things are beginning to change in perimenopause, and you have the test, and then you I mean, we're all different, so I know it's difficult to say how long is a piece of string. It depends on how wonky periods have been and how long they've been wonky for, and how long an organ might have been talking to us saying, hello, I need some help. But you know, what you have a test, you set things right. Do you repeat it annually or every few years? You know, what would you say about repetition of a test?
Well, to be quite honest, I would say, you know, if you do this as a one-off thing and you follow the recommendations, you're going to be feeling so much better. And if you're someone like, oh, I want to see that in black and white, then go for it. And have a second test. But really, I think the test is just for you to understand once you're well, isn't really. I wouldn't be pushing somebody to do another test.
Yeah.
I think if you're doing something like you're clearing, you're coming off HRT, you've been clearing.
About to ask about
time to retest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, and that's, I was just about to ask. It would presumably be a useful tool for someone who is coming off HRT, and then that instance, you know, you might be looking at supporting a woman for 6 months, say, with little tweaks around the process. Yeah, great. And then the other situation that just came to my mind is I have a client who's had a hysterectomy, and she has seen a private consultant, but I know that they only base their changes about her hormones on blood tests, and I keep saying she needs a Dutch test. It would be so helpful, wouldn't it, for her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to be getting, you know, GP hormonal tests. They're going to be done at one time.
Yeah.
About sort of where you are, what's happening in your wider picture when they take those hormone tests. So they're incredibly limited, and they're not looking at metabolites.
No.
So
No.
definitely,
Yeah,
that would be.
because for her, and I think this is very common with, when we take out the uterus, often what there's a lot of emotion attached to the organs in our body, and when we take out the uterus, what we're kind of often left with is anxiety or depression, and or sleep issues. And so that shows us that in some ways has woken up other neurotransmitters. They are not doing what they should do, and certainly it sounds like stress hormones in that picture. But that would be a common situation that I am prescribing for the emotions post hysterectomy or oophorectomy, and so something like a test like this would really give a truer picture, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Anything else you want to add in there? Because we are trying to make these short and sweet in the morning. Everyone's getting up and getting out.
I'm just thinking of like the type of the type of prescription you receive after you do the Dutch test. So have I got time to run through it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That would be great.
So if I take so I had a postmenopausal woman, so more than 12 months past menopause. She had been on HRT and she'd felt absolutely terrible, like to the level of feeling poisoned by it. And she had the sense to obviously, interestingly, it was from one of a very expensive London private clinic who had done no testing. So
wow, no testing.
No testing, absolutely. What I would consider a considerable amount to not include a test in that is quite astonishing. Anyway, she'd now had sort of 6 months since coming off these hormones, so they cleared from this. And we did the Dutch test, and it turned out that there were sort of three really significant. The first one was that her estrogen, like you, she had a terrible problem clearing estrogen. So although she was producing estrogen and she was in a good post range, she was pushing it down the most toxic metabolic pathway, and that's what Dutch shows you which of three pathways you're detoxing it. And hers was this incredibly toxic pathway where actually the DNA is damaged. So when she was put on high doses of HRT estrogen, that's why she would have felt terrible. She was in fact poisoning herself. Her sort of check-in with that was quite correct. The second thing was that her testosterone was absolutely flat. So she was, and she was depressed, and that's why she was losing testosterone, meant her muscle was turning into fat at an astonishing rate. And the third thing that was happening with her was adrenal function, absolutely flatline, burned out. She'd actually, from a empathic perspective, had years of grief. So she had this picture, and from that gave me a really lovely way to come in and look at the testosterone levels around weightlifting, that kind of muscle building exercise that you do, so that we're actually producing testosterone, to look at herbs like tribulus or maca, her adrenals, and that's very herbal. There's a lot of home remedies you can do within that, and supporting her blood sugar, teaching her how to eat so that her blood sugar is balanced throughout the day, not changing what she eats because she has a great diet, but just changing how she brings protein. And then really the estrogenic pathway, you can change that. You upweight your antioxidants. You bring in, as you said, those foodstuffs that encourage sulfation. So broccoli, green, brown, things. And also the final thing was really limited exposure to xenoestrogen, plastic. Her cleaning product within her bathroom cabinet, because that was also creating a very negative pathway. And with that, really, that is a prescription combined with the homeopathy to deal with the grief. That's a prescription for how to manage your health going forward. She now knows what she needs to do to feel well, and to process the grief. And it wasn't any huge lifestyle changes. She was a little bit of working out. She just needed to change it. So I love that it really best enabled me to really have concrete evidence for my hunch, and for her to again see that in black and white and go, okay, this is what I need. There's some things in there that scary round about how I'm metabolizing my estrogen. And now I need to crack on with, you know, really putting those processes in for the rest of my life. Yeah, and the prescription has been absolutely fantastic. I normally see people for several prescriptions, but she felt so well after that one that, you know, we'll be checking in maybe in a few months' time, but otherwise the Dutch test really show.
Yeah, brilliant. And I love that. I think increasingly we do need that kind of, like you say, quite kind of graphic information. This is what I have or I'm at, and this is what I need to do to resolve that. And I increasingly I see clients kind of sitting up and listening and doing something about that, you know, and it's something that we wouldn't have had that conversation about years ago. So, you know, bring it on, really. I think that's really, really helpful. You've explained a lot, and I hope that lots of people watch this. So if you are watching this, well, and I usually say this at the outset, and I'll put this perhaps in the title, is press #replay so that we keep this live, and I'll put a title on it saying tests and what we're discussing. These videos only stay live for 30 days, but what I will do is upload it to YouTube, and then we can pull that down and pop it in for people to have a listen to you. So thank you so much. Really, really enlightening. And like I've said, for those of you that are listening and you've listened all the way to the end, because it kind of got more interesting, I think, as we went along. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, Fiona and I are doing or creating a 6-week course for balancing your hormones. And so yeah, if that's piqued your interest, come and join us. So thank you.
You
Have a great day, and speak soon. Bye.
Bye.